Well, you don't mind?
No, not at all.
The meeting is still going on?
Actually, part 1 has just ended. The extraordinary session was convened under the pressure of the US-led Western group to discuss the findings of the 7th Jim report. In the morning, we exchanged our views. Delegations made national statements. This is my deputy. Well, you may understand that the central moment was the statement made by the US representative, Ambassador Ken Ward. Well, he just uphold the findings of the report. He praised this report as being impartial, highly professional. He commended Jim experts as entirely dedicated people, courageous people who did an excellent job. He insisted that the findings of this report be unreservedly approved by all the delegations. Well, at some point, he made public a long list of claims to the Russian Federation.
Mm-hmm.
This sounded kind of ultimatum. Russia should drop its client, Assad.
Mm-hmm.
Russia needs to stop any support. Russia should put an end to the use of the chemical weapons by its client. Russia should prevent the non-proliferation regime from being further deteriorated. He also made public the intention of the United States and some close allies to submit tomorrow a new draft resolution. He just emphasized a couple of points, major points of what would be this draft. It is about the unconditional extension of the G mandate. It is also about the Executive Council recognizing Syria as a country in non-compliance, this is a technical term, in non-compliance with the requirements of the Chemical Convention. And based on this, it is about a new set of tough sanctions, additional measures, like he put it, additional measures, sanctions against Syrian Arab Republic. Well, I had to react to this statement. I started by expressing my attitude to these claims made by the American ambassador on behalf of the United States. Literally, I said, it is impossible to speak with Russia by using the language of ultimatums. Some have already tried to do this, and they had to conclude that this is the wrong way to deal with Russia. One can negotiate, can have talks with Russia, providing that it is on a equitable basis, with due respect for each other, and we are just ready to do so, to be in talks with the United States as long as they accept the necessity to be polite, respectful of each other, and recognize the necessity of the balance of the interests. Well, having said this, I just added that actually the ball is on the Americans' side of the pitch. In other words, we're waiting for their response. Well, I voiced also our appreciation of the Jim report. Basically, the Jim report has been established in flagrant disregard for higher standards of the Chemical Convention, United Nations Security Council specific resolutions, and the previous decisions by the Executive Council itself. This is about refusal to go for on-site visit, on-situ visits. This is also about the flagrant disrespect of the basic requirements by the Chemical Convention, by this disregard for the set of precise rules elaborated by the Executive Council. Actually, it is the non-respect of the chain of custody. Translated into common language, it is about taking samples by authorized experts who are supposed to ensure their custody, their protection, all the way towards the designated laboratory for analysis. It is also about being objective, about dealing equally with the information provided by all sides. Well, speaking of the seventh report, the impression is that the regime has eagerly trusted all kind of the information provided by the armed opposition, including the worst elements of it, terrorist groups, all kind of various NGO, among them sadly known white helmets, who are directly affiliated with the terrorists of Al-Nusra organization, precisely the one which is listed as terrorist organization by the United Nations. Actually, this is none other than the branch of the Al-Qaeda, which was responsible for odious attacks against Twin Towers and Pentagon on September the 9th, 2001. Well, I did not elaborate our objections because Russian senior experts from Defense Ministry, Foreign Ministry, Trade and Economic Ministry expressed our perception of the poor quality of the investigation. Maybe for the purpose of this interview, I can cite only one or two points. You may have heard that the regime retained as the main version, actually it was its conclusion, the version about an aerial attack conducted by the Syrian aviation, which had taken off from shared air base. Well, the Americans were so kind as to provide the regime with the exact flight plan of one Syrian aircraft that was spotted near Khan Sheikhoun at the approximate time of the attack. According to the flight plan provided by the American military, the plane was nowhere closer than 5 kilometers from Khan Sheikhoun. According to the Russian experts, if should the plane follow the path as traced by the American map, it could have been hit the target in Khan Sheikhoun, distant 5 kilometers from its actual course. Even in theory, it could have been impossible. Well, this is an old Russian plane. To be in a position, in a posture to attack a target, this kind of plane should be practically overhead the target. This was not the case. According to the radar data, this plane had never made a U-turn. Should it have done this, it could have been spotted by the American radars, and this is not the case. Well, at the same time, the crater left by the explosion, it has nothing to do with the impact site left by an aerial bomb, especially of such huge dimensions and weight, nearly 500 kilograms, according to the experts. The crater is rather shallow, and most experts are of the view that this shallow crater was left by the explosion of a makeshift device, which was put on site. And this is our version about the staged provocation. You know the conclusion of the GIM in this respect? Well, it concluded that the version of the staged provocation, this on-ground explosion, should be rejected under the motive, the only motive practically, that nobody had witnessed perpetrators laying kind of explosive device. But let me tell you, this is quite ludicrous. We've been told that the gym is made up by very high professionals, including former detectives, enjoying experience as detectives, criminal detectives. Well, have you ever heard something about the perpetrators, especially the terrorists, inviting people to be witnesses of their misdeeds of laying explosives? No. There was a recently tragedy that occurred in Manchester. Do you think that this kamikaze who carried out the attack, do you think that he would have invited people shouting out, look at me, I'm trying to put my explosives in my bag, I'm preparing the terrorist attack? No, certainly not. The terrorists, they used to work just in a secret way, without any witnesses, like it was the case recently in Manhattan. Cowed way, driver ramming into the crowd, killing innocent people. The same signature like we saw in Barcelona and previously, unfortunately, in France, Promenade des Anglais. Well, and it's quite surprising that former policemen, former detectives could reject the whole version, only supposing that it is quite enough to say nobody has witnessed and it's okay. This version does not exist. This is about our perception as regards seriousness of this investigation.
So what's the... you and Iran have now got a draft.
Yes, I will come to this, but let me maybe finish with our explanation why we are skeptical about this report. Well, you may certainly have watched, seen the footage, video footage, portraying little children, presumably victims of the sarin poisonment. Atrocious pictures, just babies agonizing, dying at the hands of the white helmet. At some point, some experts found it troubling to see that these children had, all of them, pupils immensely, hugely diluted, which is quite the contrary to the known effect of the sarin, very powerful nervous agent, the impact of which, the effect of which is to cause victims' pupils constricted, in other words, reduced to the size of just a pinhead, what is called pinpointed pupil. Well, we asked team leaders of the fact-finding team, what is your explanation about this? How come that children presented as victims of the sarin attack present this abnormality? Well, they would not answer at all. It was on July the 5th during the briefing. I kept asking the same questions, and finally they acknowledged they had not been asked to investigate this particular thing. They had not been asked, and if I'm not mistaken, one of the team leaders said, in any case, we did not consider these pictures, this footage. You can rectify me if I'm wrong. We did not consider this footage as our primary evidence. I retorted saying, look, this is actually the triggering point of the whole story. Do you know that according to the press, to some press reports, I was in Washington back then. The president, President Trump, was shown these atrocious photos. He was so appalled, so shocked, that quite immediately he ordered to launch a missile attack against the shared air base, from which, as he had been told, Syrian planes had taken off to carry out this attack. By the way, there is this flamboyant lady, Nikki Haley, in Washington. They insisted on showing these atrocious photographs to all the members of the United Nations Security Council. So we should acknowledge that these images, and I would like you to write it down, have somehow become the iconic image of the sufferings of the whole Syrian people. Well, we were entitled to have the explanation. We did not have any during this briefing. And finally, just to get away from us, they told us, I mean the team leaders, don't worry, don't be in a hurry. You just sit and wait until the GIM report comes, and at that moment you will have all the answers. Indeed, the GIM report was released, but we did not see even the hint of the beginning of the explanation. Well, our American colleague, for whom I have much respect, the ambassador word, he used to use the term of the obfuscation regarding the Syrian government. They obfuscate this or that. Their initial declaration is entirely false, so they're concealing Russia is helping them. It is all about obfuscation. So I can just return, unfortunately, this argument, saying that in this precise case of these children photos, we are entitled to speak about kind of obfuscation. You know, one day here in The Hague, I happened to meet a very well-known expert. We started to speak about this incident, and I asked him questions. He was very reluctant to mention the whole case, but since I insisted, at some point, exasperated, seemingly exasperated, he just interjected. Well, don't you understand that this is all about the information war? Well, actually, we do understand it is about the information war. But the next step will be for us to acknowledge that somebody have sacrificed little children, sacrificed them for the purpose of their political agenda. And let me assure you that we will insist to shine light, to do everything which is possible to find out the perpetrators of this odious, ignominious crime, to prosecute them and to get them severely condemned. It is all about the executors, people who executed this provocation, but also about the people who let them do this odious crime, carry this odious crime. Well, this was very passionate, this debate. Like my colleague, I keep citing him. He's a good friend of mine besides he just had this remark. It's very hot today. We needed to cool off. And he took off his vest, his coat, because it was a very tense debate. All the more so that prodded by the Americans. Yes, it's the exact term, prodded by the Americans. Some of the delegations tried to act as Americans did, to be very passionate, to speak with lots of emotions, in a very loud way. Well, and I had to tell them, to these people, beware the possibility of aligning automatically on what is saying, on what is said, what is being said by our American friends, our American colleagues. We need to be very careful, as a matter of fact. I reminded them of the famously known episode involving then Secretary of State Colin Powell holding out a small bottle with the alleged stems of Siberian anthrax. He was speaking from the rostrum of the United Nations, and he was trying to convince people to get on board to invade Iraq under the pretext of a very serious threat emanating from Iraq in terms of weapon, nuclear, chemical, biological weapons, all the weapons of mass destruction. And the United States managed to do so, despite the opposition from this Russia, France, and Germany. We were united at that time. The United States launched this invasion in gross violation of the international law, and without the consent of the United Nations Security Council, which is the only body authorizing the use of force in the international relations. Well, I told them that just a couple of days, maybe a week ago, Gordon Brown, former British Prime Minister, released a book of memoir entitled My Life, Our Times. And he complained. Gordon Brown cannot, in any case, be suspected as somebody being disloyal towards Washington, towards the American allies. But nevertheless, he complained in this book about the insistence put by the Americans to get the UK involved in this Iraqi invasion. And in doing so, the Americans concealed from the Brits that according to the secret report by the American intelligence services, report dated back to 2002, that is 1 year before the invasion. According to this report, there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, no weapons at all, and there was no even the industrial capacity for producing such weapons. Therefore, the Brits were persuaded by the Americans to join the invasion in order to deliver the world from the frightening threat of mass weapons of mass destructions posed by Saddam Hussein. Well, it's very telling, isn't it? Or is it? Well, I also reminded them, delegations, about other former British Prime Minister, referring to Tony Blair, who publicly apologized. He was very penitent, actually. He apologized to the families of the British soldiers fallen during the invasion, the Iraqi invasion. He regretted, bitterly regretted, that he had let the Americans embark the UK in this adventure, in this invasion. Well, he apologized to the families of British soldiers. Maybe there were several hundreds of them, victims. But who will apologize to the families of the civilian victims? And there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands killed during the Iraqi invasion, during Libya events prompted by the Americans. And unfortunately, thousands of lives being killed now in Syria. The situation in which in this country has been steadily deteriorating, not least because of the short-sighted policy of the United States. Well, but all of this discussion, this confrontation, spearheaded by the Americans, has a bitter taste of déjà vu. Like I said, a bitter taste of déjà vu. Again, the Americans passionately speak out, calling upon the whole world to raise against the evil with deadly weapons, to get rid of the Syrian regime, and especially the object of their hatred, President Assad. Actually, they made it their idée fixe. They are completely obsessed by this. just before coming here, I was interviewed by the television, and they asked me, well, the Americans from the get-go, they said, we do know that it is all about the fault of the Syrian government. Why, in this case, this investigation? What is the additional value of this? And I said, yes, I can confirm that as early as April the 6th, one senior official whom I met in Washington, answering my question, said, we don't need any investigation at all because we are pretty certain about the involvement of the Syrian government. We are of this view because we have our intelligence data. We don't need any investigation.
There was an American official who said that to you?
Yes. Well, afterwards they were very happy that the Jim report produced the expected conclusion, to the point that somehow we guessed that the Jim team was hugely influenced by some kind of wishes expressed by one side. Let's put it very mildly, to put it very mildly. So it's all about this obsession regarding the regime change. They're doing everything that is possible to get Syrian government removed, Assad removed. Well, and it's all about political agenda, and this is very, very damageable. It's not a good thing, because while forwarding their agenda, political agenda, of the political change in Syria, they are completely destroying the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. They have already caused a huge split in the organization. They have already provoked several votes here, to the extent that at some point the Executive Council was split roughly in two parts. One, approving the American plan of actions, and the other reluctant to follow the American path. This is a very, very worrisome situation. Well, this afternoon we suggested with the Iranians to improve the working methods of fact-finding team, and it was very logical. There is kind of link between FFM and GIM. The FFM is providing the GIM with basic information about the findings, the investigation, and obviously the success of the GIM is largely dependent on the good quality of the work performed by the fact-finding team. To improve the quality of this work, what do we need? We need that the fact-finding team feels a burden, or how should I say, feels constrained by the strict rules of the Technical Secretariat, by the requirements of the chemical conventions, by all kind of documents that have been adopted. We need the fact-finding team to stick strictly to the chain of custody, to work, to give up remote investigation, to not to refuse on-site, on-situ visits. And finally, the fact-finding team should be more balanced and well represented from the geographical standpoint of view. It does not come as a secret if I tell you that according to our information, the fact-finding team is largely dominated by the countries of the so-called Syria Friends Group. These are countries that from the get-go, from the day one, were hostile to the Syrian government and President Assad. While we do admit that experts of the fact-finding team are very good professionals, but being citizens of some countries, they may have some difficulties in order to accommodate, and I will say it in a very cautious way, in order to accommodate their deeds with the dominant ideas of the country of their origin. Please don't misunderstand me, because this afternoon an interpreter made a mistake while interpreting me, and he said the Russian ambassador just had just told us that they did not trust the fact-finding team experts because they are presumably reporting to their respective governments. None of this. I did not say this. It is all about the inner perception of the obligation. Somehow, maybe they feel this inner pressure. But anyway, we have been repeatedly told that each expert of the fact-finding team, while joining the FFN, leaves in the entry his or her national ID, national passport. And in doing so, he becomes free of any obligations towards her or his country of origin. He is now considered as a citizen of the world, whole world. He has no nationality at this point. This is not a British man, this is not an Australian man, this is just international civil servant. This is all about this. Well, if this is so, why the Technical Secretariat categorically refuses to take Iranian and Russian experts on board? They are ready, like their colleagues, to leave their passports, IDs, Russian, Iranians in the entry. And therefore, they are ready to be considered as the citizens of the world. No, this is not the case. They're systematically rejected. So, what does this speak about? We are supposed to believe that Australians and Brits, everybody else, become citizens of the world, international civil servant, while leaving their passports in the entry, and the Russians and the Iranians can't do this, leaving their passports. Where is the logic? I kept asking this question. At no moment I have received no response. So what can be the conclusion? The conclusion is about the double standards, about very skewed, I dare even say lopsided approach. The Russians and Iranians are treated like people who could not be trusted. Why, in this case, should we trust, as we are urged to, trusted the other experts? Where is the logic? Well, that is why we insist on improving the working methods of the fact-finding team. Well, you may imagine that my good friend, the American ambassador, jumped to the micro response to our proposal. Well, honestly, I have been expecting him to speak like he did in the past about Russia, slandering the the technical secretariat, denigrating them, devaluating the role of the Director General. Fortunately, he refrained from doing so, but instead he found yet another catchphrase, saying that actually Russia and Iran are trying to turn clock back. I quote, to turn clock back. In other words, Russia and Iran are trying to put aside, to brush aside whatever positive has been done by the technical secretariat, by the fact-finding team. This is not a good thing to do. The United States will strongly oppose this kind of resolution. He didn't hide it. Well, what did he say else? He tried to be somewhat mockery. Can we say this to be mockery, to mock in Russian attitude, while insinuating that Russia is picking up from menu what results can feed it and what other results should be dismissed, while not accepting the findings of the report regarding Ham Shi-Hun. Russia is, he said, is strangely silent about the other episode, ОЗХО. That is, in his spirit, in his estimate, the evident proof of this selective Russian approach. Russia takes whatever it likes and rejects whatever it dislikes. Well, I told him that this is not true. To start with the episode regarding ОЗХО is connected with the Russian military finding the traces of explosives, bringing them duly documented to the people of the OPCW, but nevertheless it took 6-7 months for the SFM team to draw the right conclusion. All the more so, this was strange, all the more so that it took the fact-finding team only 1 or 2 days to conclude about the use of some sarin substance regarding the Han Shi-hun incident. The Russian military were questioned for nearly 6 months. Video conferences, calls, meetings. The experts kept asking them all kind of detail, logs, video footages. And on the contrary, they were eager to jump to whatever they received from the hands of the armed opposition. This is about this objective equal approach. But I pointed out to the fact that even regarding the ОЗХО incident, we were quite perplexed by the conclusion made by the JIM report experts. They concluded about the involvement of the Daesh only because no other terrorist group, in their estimate, had been found using the chemicals of this kind. But this is not serious at all. This is far-fetched conclusion. This is yet another proof of how light their conclusions are, not based on a scientific basis. They did not even want to go deep. They just contented with themselves with whatever they could find. Well, and finally, I told our American friend that we are not turning clock back. What we are asking for is to set clock up in a manner that these clocks ticks in a rhythm with the higher standards of chemical weapons prohibition convention and other documents, including the United Nations Security Council resolution. Well, and I concluded that it's high time for all of us to think about the future of our organization. One time, very successful organization which won Nobel Prize. Should this question be considered now? Our organization would certainly not win Nobel Prize anymore, because it is now an image, a desolate image of the of the delegations hassling over some texts. This is infighting, which is stood up steadily by our American colleagues. It's very sad. We need to do something about this, to resume working on a consensual basis, like it was the case in the not very remote past.
Mr. Ambassador, I've got two questions. The first is about the proposal, the draft resolution. I read there were certain points, I think 7 or 8 points in the draft resolution, and I think you're talking about not turning back the clock. So do you want the FFM to go back and actually start from the beginning? What do you want? What does Russia want to do with the report as it is? Do you want to put it on ice, or do you want to start send in a new team and possibly actually get to the site for a proper investigation?
Yes. As I said, Russia is against the use of chemical weapons by whoever and under whatever circumstances. We are in favor of finding out criminals, perpetrators, and in favor of prosecuting them. So we are of the view that the investigation should be resumed, and the regime could be trusted. Why not? With the mission of the investigation, but providing that this mechanism is radically reformatted. That is, excuse me. That is to stick, to be in compliance with all kinds of the requirements. What they have been doing now, it was in flagrant disregard of for the convention. I have already cited all of this. So we are not against the regime. As a matter of fact, yes, it can operate. We will be ready to extend its mandate, but under this specific provision, this specific condition. But unfortunately, the draft submitted by the Americans is quite different. It's totally about the automatical extension of the mandate, and they accept to make maybe some cosmetic changes, not changes regarding the basis, the fundamental principles of the regime mechanism.
So does this mean that Russia would veto the draft?
Well, let's not anticipate. The discussion is not over. They're still discussing. We will see how things will play out.
But are we talking here about the Executive Council decision, not about a future Security Council resolution on extending the mandate of the regime?
In this case, I understood that the question was about the Security Council
correct,
resolution.
yes, yeah.
About the Security Council.
No, so I'm telling you that let's not anticipate. We will see. The discussion is not over. And here, I don't know. There are two drafts. The one we already submitted with the Iranians.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, there will be some other countries to be co-sponsors of this draft. Tomorrow, there will be the draft submitted by the Americans and some of their closest allies. We will see, but unfortunately, given this obsession, this American obsession with their political agenda, I don't exclude that again, under their pressure, the member states will be unfortunately faced with the prospect of yet another voting procedure.
I looked at the American statement, and it was a scathing, to say the least. The statement made by Ambassador Ward.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that it's conducive to move the process forward? If you look at the language used by Ambassador Ward, I mean, he's for instance said that Russia refuses to acknowledge the truth. There's one thing that he said. He also was talking about you collaborating with Syria. What are your response to those?
All is very relative. So he seems to ask us whether Russia accepts the truth, and I can return the same question: whether the United States accepts the truth regarding charity base, regarding little children, martyrs that have been sacrificed. Well, it's all relative, you know.
You accuse the Americans of politicizing the Executive Council. The Americans accuse you of politicizing the Executive Council. How close are we getting to the end of this process? How can the OPCW continue to operate if these two blocks are facing one another?
Yes, for the time being, there is no prospect for us, the United States, the Russian Federation, to meet halfway. As American ambassador said, as it put it, we are navigating in parallel worlds. We're too far away. But I do foresee the danger for the integrity of our organization, for the success of its activities. Well, it's about putting new pressure on Syria. It's about stripping it from its rights as a member state of the Chemical Convention.
But do you think Syria still has those rights as a member if there are so many question marks? It's joined in 2013, we're now towards the end of 2017. There are still large gaps, according to the OPCW, in its initial declaration.
You do understand what were the conditions in where they did the initial declaration. It was just during the civil war, during the conflict, they were given just a short lapse of time, maybe, if I'm not wrong, 2 weeks, and it may have made some mistakes, some inaccurate things, but this is absolutely normal, and Syrians can make some amendments, some precisions, like previous countries did in the past. Even the United States, if I'm not wrong, made some adjustments.
So maybe about 11, 12 times.
Made some adjustments. This is a normal process. And all the more so that the Syrians are very well engaged with the technical secretariat. We are offering their cooperation. just read the reports of the team in charge of the verification of the initial declaration by Syria.
So you trust that team, but you don't trust the fact-finding mission? You trust the verification team?
I trust the prospect of the dialogue between the Syrians and the technical secretariat. At some point, the decision was taken, and the American ambassador referred to it, to mandate Director General with direct engagement with the Syrians. And it is about the high-level consultations between Technical Secretariat and Vice Minister Migdad from Syria. And the Syrians have been steadily making steps. For instance, they accepted to make some adjustments, very important adjustments, to their initial declaration regarding the SSRC facilities, research center. They accepted to meet the requirements by the technical secretariat to declare additional laboratories under the Article 3 and 6. So obviously there is progress being done. You may just consult with the technical secretariat. I guess that there was a statement about a step forward acknowledged by the technical secretariat after the recent consultations between Vice Minister Migdad and
limited progress.
So there is progress, and there is no doubt about.
You look at the word progress, and other people look at the word limited. It's 4 years after their initial declaration. Limited progress.
Well, but we needed to achieve a good result in the end of the day. Yes or no?
Yes.
So while cooperating, we expect this result, and the quicker we have this result, the better it will be for all of us. So we encourage the Syrians to work with the technical secretariat, and the technical secretariat is eager to work with them. But our American friends, unfortunately, are doing things that will hinder this cooperation furthermore. Pushed into the corner, treated as pariahs, Syrians may have think twice about the necessity for them to continue this engagement. If there is a new set of sanctions, tough sanctions expected by the Americans, well, there will be absolutely no horizon open for the Syrians. They will lose any interest in pursuing this engagement, in pursuing this cooperation. We should think about this, and we don't need, and we don't have to lose this out of our sight.
What do you, Mr. Ambassador? You're talking about the regime change. Should the government of President Assad be replaced? From Russia's side, you know, I mean, it's a very hypothetical question, of course. I mean, it's, but if that happens, is there anybody that can fill that vacuum? You know, I mean, because obviously, from what I understand, you're saying is that there's also concern that if the Assad regime is replaced, that you have a power vacuum, and who do you think could possibly fill that vacuum?
You know, we repeatedly said, we have repeatedly said that it is up to the Syrian people itself to decide their fate. We have already pleaded for an inclusive dialogue between all the fractions of the Syrian society. Let me remind you that we have intensified our efforts to help this happen. I mean the engagement of the political dialogue. Don't remember Astana process launched by Russia, Turkey, Iran, and we managed, it was already a success to bring together people who are at various, at opposite sides in this conflict, including, which is very important, the people who are waging war on the ground from both sides. We managed to engage the process of setting up what is called zones of stability. This will allow the political process go ahead, and at the same time this will allow to bring humanitarian relief. And actually we are very surprised that our American friends are not willing to think about humanitarian relief in some zones of stability. Not at all. This is quite astonishing. Since there is a zone of stability, why not helping people? Why not bringing the necessary humanitarian relief? Well, we are still in favor of the political engagement, inclusive political dialogue. We cannot prejudge the future of the Syrian people. Who will be at the head of their state? It will be the sovereign choice of the Syrian people. I guess we exhausted entirely our agenda.
Shane, you are going back to the OPCW now. Is that for it? Is that it for today? Including again tomorrow?
Well.
Can I just ask your view of the new DG? Is that something that will be accepted by, or has been accepted by consensus?
Yes, it was actually a rare, not very frequent example of how unanimous the Executive Council could be. And I'm very happy that finally this choice has been made. I know very well Fernando Arias Gonzalez, a good friend of mine, very experienced diplomat who enjoys many years of fruitful diplomatic service, and he has already tried to be helpful here in the OPCW, trying to make bridges to help us fill the gaps, to move in order to meet halfway. And there is something about his diplomatic past. The other day we were with him in his study at the embassy, and there are plenty of photos where he is photographed with presidents, prime ministers, and we were speaking, and at some point he just made a gesture saying, Alexander, we need to think about these famous people. They are looking at us and they watch us. We needed to go ahead. We needed to overcome our difficulties. And he's determined. I'm sure, pretty sure of this. He's determined to be helpful and to do a good job.
It's been a long day. I think that's about it.
This is on the record, off the record? It's all on the record, right?
Yes, you may cite me.
Okay, thank you.